so I think I'm gonna have to sit there to switch slides, but I just wanted you to see my face before I go take a seat. Thank you guys for coming today. Yeah, that would be really great if you could. Then I don't have to hide in the shadows. So I'm going to talk about bomb trains today. I'm just going to give kind of a brief overview of the issue, show you a map of what's been going on in this area, and talk about some of the risks associated with it, as well as how to identify these the bomb trains that are coming through, most of our communities. So for those that don't know, I work for Food and Water Watch. I'm an organizer for them. I'm also part of a group called WNY Drilling Defense. We do a monthly meeting at the Crane Library, and we've been starting to organize just since December, since we won our ban on fracking, actually. We've been starting to organize around this issue because it is very much connected to the fracking issue. All of it has to do with fossil fuel infrastructure, and obviously, this is fracked oil that's coming through our neighborhood, and highly explosive. So why don't we go to the next slide? All right, so the bomb trains, unfortunately, these trains have been going through our neighborhoods with very little environmental study and no real impact study on what could happen to our communities as well as our natural resources along the way. There are rail lines that connect the Bakken fields in North Dakota to different refineries. A lot of this stuff, the oil that's being taken from the Bakken shale is being exported. So trains that are carrying the Bakken crude are coming through our communities, passing by homes, passing by schools, passing by community centers, churches. I don't know if I need this, but it's really neat. And part of the reason there's been such an increase in the oil train traffic is because the oil and gas industry is trying to evade regulations for having to build new pipelines. So since this fracking boom in North Dakota, where they've started to extract a lot of Bakken oil, there's been a 4,000% increase in the last 5 years. So this is a problem that unfortunately isn't going away. So I think it's something that we need to be aware of and know what's going on. And really, it's our communities that are at risk just because they don't want to go through all of the regulations and costs with building more pipelines, which aren't necessarily safe, but are safer than this. And you can tell that it is a Bakken oil car because it will have, let's see if I can figure this out, this on it. It'll have a red diamond. It'll say 1267 and it'll have the 3 under it. It's explosive, you can tell because it's the color red. And this means, crude oil, you can tell that it's probably Bakken oil, especially if it's coming on a long train like this that's 100 plus oil cars long.
Rita, does that show up on one of the cars there? I don't see anything red on
it. It's not on it. It's actually not on it. That's a very bad example.
Okay. Is it the red that means explosive?
Yeah.
Or the number that means
the red that means explosive, and the 12673, that's going to mean that it's the Bakken crude. And I think Jean's going to talk more about.
I'll explain more about those.
Yeah, she's going to talk more about that. So what's the problem? There's a lot of problems with this. Oil trains derail, which can lead to poisoned drinking water, poisoned health concerns, explosions, especially in blast zones. So if you're living within a mile of the trains, the danger is increased exponentially because those are the areas where even first responders are told not to go into. They're told not to go into a 1 mile radius of a derailment because there can be explosions. There's also increased municipal costs. This is a picture of a derailment. I think Charlie's going to talk some more about some of the high-profile derailments. But there was one in 2013 that was especially compelling in Quebec that cost the lives of 47 people and destroyed the whole downtown area in a small town in Quebec. And it has the potential to do the same here. I think you hear really now like once a week of a derailment or an explosion because of these oil trains. And these tankers, the black tankers, are especially dangerous because they're actually defective. And everybody knows that, everyone admits that. I called Schumer's office and they know that they're defective, and part of the efforts are going to change these rail cars to a different kind of rail car, but those aren't necessarily safer. But the DOT 111 cars are actually, they puncture easily if they fall over or derail, and they're prone to explosions. So they're especially dangerous. So these trains travel through population centers, schools, homes, businesses. There's not a lot of rail safety that goes on. The community gets no say about whether or not they want this. It's not like some kind of project where they have to do an environmental impact statement in New York. This is already happening, and it's not something that we really know about or that emergency responders are really prepared for. So the crude by rail is actually more toxic and more volatile than conventional crude. One of these cars is equal to 2 million sticks of dynamite, so very explosive if it were to puncture and combust. Crude oil is also carbon intensive, which of course exacerbates climate change and extreme weather, and also, increases our dependence on fossil fuels as opposed to really moving towards renewables. It's just, feeding the fossil fuel frenzy. And then of course fracking. Fracking, which we all know is a dangerous drilling technique, is actually used to get this oil. So just imagine the devastated communities in North Dakota and what it must look like there in the oil fields of North Dakota, what the air quality must be like, what it must be like to live in those communities. All right, so this is a map of the Western New York rail line here. According to the Wall Street Journal, Erie County sees 27.5 trains weekly. And a train can have about 100 or more cars. So we're talking about 2,700 something of these cars come through Erie County every week. So that's a lot. When we're talking about explosion of power from one of these cars, there's about 2,700 of these coming through Erie County a week. And the rail line here, you could just assume that if you live by a rail line, at least some Bakken crude is coming your way. What we found is that actually more Bakken crude comes through like the South Buffalo area, and then it goes off towards Albany. But even if you live up in North Buffalo, where that loop is, you're also going to get some. And Jean's going to talk more about that, about what she's seen living in North Buffalo with the rails in her yard. Can we go back to one?
Okay. Sorry.
And one thing that I wanted to note here is that a derailment in Western New York, you can see how close it is here to our waterways, Lake Erie, Niagara River, going down to Niagara Falls. There is a really big risk here because we live on the Great Lakes. I mean, it's something that we need to be protecting, but these trains go extremely close. They're actually within a 1 mile blast zone, and 3/4 of the city of Buffalo live within a 1 mile blast zone of the rails. So a lot of folks are in danger with this. There was a great article in the Art Voice that came out maybe about a month ago, a good couple of pages about this, which is also informative if you want to find some more information. Okay, possible solutions. So there's a lot of folks talking about a lot of solutions to this. We've been in touch with the group in Albany Pause about potential solutions there. And these are some of the things that people have come up with in our meetings. Like I said, we've been discussing this. And there's a lot of folks that want to see increased regulation. So putting an end to unsafe tanker cars, those DOT 111 cars, removing some of the explosive gases before those trains leave North Dakota, which will make them, less likely to explode. Limit the size of the trains. Like I said, they're 100 plus rail cars. Maybe making them shorter is a solution. Equip and prepare emergency responders, which is kind of like, obviously, like that's something that we want to do. But that also takes a lot of money, and that takes a lot of initiative on the legislators' part, and a lot of pressure from the public. Rerouting trains around population centers and away from water supplies. Obviously, that's something that seems very common sense and could be a potential solution. Right to know laws that give citizens the ability to know what's coming through their neighborhoods, and the ability to say no through some kind of public input period. And the one thing that I think, of course, and then renewable energy. so that the demand for oil decreases, as do the rail shipments. And the one thing that I think is a particularly good idea, which is why it's bolded on here, is I think that it would be a great idea for us as constituents of Governor Cuomo to put pressure on him, the decision maker, and the DEC to put a stop to the rail permits until an environmental impact statement is done, and really the risks can be assessed to New York's communities and natural resources. When we think about, you can go to the next slide. So when you think about what the environmental impact statement did, for example, for the fracking campaign, one thing that it did is it bought us time. It made sure that fracking wasn't happening in New York State, permits weren't being issued, and we had time to see what was happening in other states. We were able to see the explosions, the contaminated water. We saw all of that. An environmental impact statement would also tell us which areas are especially at risk, who's going to be our first responders to the scene, essentially how are the communities that these trains are going through going to handle this. And it will make us a whole heck of a lot more prepared. And I think that it would be in that EIS process that people would be able to comment, people would be able to go to public hearings, like we did on the fracking issue, and it would get people involved. I think it would also allow us to put pressure on our state level lawmakers. A lot of folks like to say that, because this is a federally regulated thing, which it is, that the trains are federally regulated, that state level lawmakers can't do anything. But I think that's the same thing that you hear, even when you go and you want an elected official to do something about anything, they always try to say somebody else is in charge of doing that. And I think that, people that have ever lobbied or gone to a legislative visit have heard that before, even called your lawmaker. They say, that's somebody else's job. Oh no, this body is supposed to do it, or this legislator is supposed to do it. But the thing is that the governor is the governor. He has the ability to put a stop to this and demand an environmental impact statement. And we've already seen some action from his office. So we know that he has the ability to do more. What we've seen from his office already is that he sent some inspectors down the rails to see if there was any safety issues along the rails in some of these cars. But very, very minimal stuff. And we need to push him for more. And I think that, we have the ability, as a community that is really in the thick of it, we have the ability to put pressure on him. I think that if we speak to him as a region on this issue, that it's something that he could move on. And how do we get an environmental impact statement? So reach out to your state level lawmakers, your senators, assembly members, folks who have some kind of relationship with Governor Cuomo. And I think reach out to Governor Cuomo himself, and this is something that we did a lot in a ban fracking campaign, is put pressure right on that decision maker, right on that elected official, and don't give it up. Because I know it seems like a lot, like rerouting, oh my gosh, how much money will that take? It seems like a lot, but it's also our community and our safety, and how much money would it take to replace all of that? So we can go to the next slide. Okay, what can you do to stop the bomb trains? You can write LTEs, letters to the editor, which if you're at the Sierra Club Writers Group, maybe you're interested in. We talk about this at all of our meetings. When we do our monthly meetings, we always say who submitted letters to the editor, because they're important. Elected officials read the opinion pages. It matters. They want to know what communities care about. They want to know what people in the community are talking about. And we can pay thousands of dollars to get an ad in the Buffalo News about bomb trains, or we could write a 2-paragraph letter to the editor and get it published, and now all of our community knows about this really important issue, right? So I think that when we're writing, one thing that you want to remember is to put pressure on that decision maker. So if you see the solution as being an environmental impact statement, call Governor Cuomo out and say Governor Cuomo should really pursue an environmental impact statement. The DEC needs to pursue an environmental impact statement. It's okay to call out your legislators, and they, like I said, they want to know what's going on within the community. And the Buffalo News has a really large readership throughout the state. It doesn't just stop here, and it is possible too that Governor Cuomo's office will read that. One of his aides will tell him what it said or something like that. But his office will read it, and he'll know what people in Buffalo care about, and it's a way of putting pressure on him. And then you can come to our next meeting. Our next meeting, it's Thursday, May 7th at the Crane Library down the street. It's on the second floor at 6 o'clock. Join us if you can, and we're going to talk about how we can really push forward this EIS and what are some next steps for us as a region, being a community that is so impacted by bomb trains. I think I just have one more announcement. So I'm going to pass out a handout about bomb trains, and then I'm going to pass one out about what we're working on in Amherst. So those of you that live in Amherst know about this campaign. Those that don't, let me just tell you really quickly. So obviously we banned fracking in New York, but unfortunately the impacts of fracking are not limited to the well pad. And there are still areas in New York State that are getting fracking waste. Fracking waste is full of all of the chemicals that they use in the fracking process, and also has potential levels of radioactivity in it from the shale. It could potentially have heavy metals in it. It's nasty stuff. It's nothing you want to be exposed to. And sometimes they take it to wastewater treatment plants that can't really treat it. Sometimes they put it in injection wells, and sometimes they just spread it on our roads as a de-icer in the winter time, or to keep down dust. So there's really only, I would say, experimental at best ways of disposing of this waste. And it's happening already in a lot of New York communities. So one thing that we're working on in Amherst is a fracking waste ban. We want to include fracking in there too, just because, but it's mostly a fracking waste ban. There is a wastewater treatment plant in Amherst that we want to make sure never gets waste. We want to make sure that they're never going to have waste put on their roads in the winter time to melt the ice. And a way that you can help is by calling the town board. They actually passed a resolution to pass this ban a year ago, and they still have not done it. That's how backed up they are, and so they really need to hear from you. So I'm going to pass this out to you. Please call, even if you don't live in Amherst. All the pressure helps. Thanks so much.